And a great day to everyone who is with us on Unintentional Hero, you people who are experienced in understanding what it means to start on, build an entire empire around what they are doing for themselves and for others. Because after all, why would you build a business if you didn't benefit other people? And today, I have someone who is actually very special to me because he is an inspiring person for what I love very much, which is podcasting. That's your own right now. And over the last year, we have been back and forth with each other a couple of times. And I think I've gotten to know him enough. And I've also been a part of some of his great help people who are interested in doing podcasts. Just last Saturday, it was actually a 7 hour, I think, program. I made almost all of it. And it taught you how to monetize your podcast. And he has many more coming in the future with experts in the podcast field. Now, I don't want to give away a whole lot here about Super Joe Pardo, who is our guest. So why don't I just let him come on here and talk about himself a little bit more than I even know myself. Joe, welcome to Unintentional Heroes.
What is up, Super Chris? How you doing today? How
Hey,
you
I love it. Your own intro music. Keep going.
Right?
Keep
Everyone
going.
should have their own intro music. It's empowering, right? It gets you going and feeling really positive about where you're headed, like this interview.
Well, you certainly have all the tricks. I want to hear the bell. Is the bell handy there? Just
the
make
bell
sure
is always handy. It's
there
right
you
here.
It's always
on
handy.
You want,
Super
you
Joe
want
has
a,
the sound
you want a
effects
cash
there.
register? Like we can,
Oh yeah,
I got to get
register.
more sound effects. I've been slacking. I've been so busy doing so many different things, and I haven't had time to like think about it. I need some crickets. I mean, I got some claps. We can celebrate like when something great happens or break glass. But usually you hear me with the bell.
You're on fire, baby. You're on fire. you know, I first got back interested in podcasting back in the John Lee Dumas days when he started. You remember? You know John, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've met him. I've had him on my show.
Have you? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he was hot. I mean, on fire, as they say, right? That was his, and he still is, I'm sure. But he really inspired me, and that was kind of in the early days of podcasting. Really, there were not
early-ish. I mean, it already existed for like a decade at that point, but yeah, it was still it wasn't mainstream-ish. It was starting to go mainstream-ish, and so it was pretty still early on, even though it had been around for a decade prior.
Right. It getting the footing and all that kind of good stuff, which it's really come now. I think there are probably how many podcasts are actually on the air, Joe?
Apple just crossed the million podcast mark like
Good
a month
grief.
ago, 2 months ago, something.
Wow.
Excuse me, something to that effect.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, before I ask you any major questions, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how all this got into Super Joe's life?
Well, it started out like, the story really goes back to when I was about 6 years old. I grew up in a family business, and it's in the truck parts industry in the Northeast. And growing up, my parents got divorced, and I had this like passion to want to help other people. Around the age of 6, I was crying on my grandparents' floor, and because I was like, oh, I'm the only boy, and like I'm supposed to take over the business, but I want to be a child psychologist to help other kids going through divorce like I am. And I really wasn't a big school person, so like it turned out like that wasn't, a few years into it, I was not that down for going to school for like an extra 10 years and all that. But it really kind of set the stage for where I would end up later on in life. Like a lot of things, as kids, sets that stage for us. I'm a huge Disney fan, and I loved going to Disney as a kid, and went many years over the course of years. And but I was also kind of like a bit shy, and one of the things that I got into when I was about 10 years old was DJing. Like I loved listening to DJs on the radio, and not the hey everybody, like that thing, but like the nighttime DJs that are mixing. Like you can see right here, there's my turntables right behind me. So I got into it, but I didn't have anybody to really like push that button until I was old enough to start driving, and I met a bunch of other DJs at other clubs, and I started DJing, and going out to bars and DJing at those bars and those clubs and stuff. So it really helped expand my horizon, in the realm of like getting in front of people, going to parties that I would never would have went to prior, because I'm a computer gamer. I grew up in front of a computer, and all that. I mean, from like '97, I was blogging and writing, creating websites and stuff. So that was, while the rest of my family grew up under trucks, I grew up in front of computers, and so I took those two skills, and continue to build websites and all that. So when it came time to leave my family's business, it was not a great time. It wasn't a great experience. Me and my dad were not getting along. My grandfather had already passed away. And I was, already, we were kind of at odds leading up to that point. And in 2014, or actually in the summer of 2013, I decided to leave. I didn't know what the heck I was going to do with my life. Like I never really worked anywhere outside of doing some, websites on the side for people, some IT work and stuff like that. Because I was the IT director at our business. I was also became the operations director of operations there. And I was like, I want to go do something else. I don't have a degree because I didn't stick with school after I left. And I'm like, well, maybe I'll go back to school, start going back to school. By April 2014, it was a wrap. Like me and my dad ended up in a fist fight. I left. Still didn't know what the heck I was going to do. Even though I was going back to school, I was going to networking events and like meeting people and like trying to figure out like what kind of industry do I want to do? What do I want to serve? And to that point, like, I was the person that like everybody came to talk to and they needed advice and all these things that eventually got rolled into a podcast. So fast forward to about a month, I'm sitting on a plane to Disney World, of course, because that's where most great, like the shower, most great things happen on a plane to Disney World. I had just released my first DJ album, and again, this is why all this kind of takes place. And I was talking to my friend that we were going down to run a race, and he was like, "Oh, well, because I was getting on podcasts at the time for Disney podcasts, and he's like, "Well, have you heard of this show, Entrepreneur on Fire?" And I was like, "Nah, I haven't. I honestly, I hadn't really, outside of a few Disney podcasts, I had not listened to any other podcasts." And he's like, "Well, they just interview entrepreneurs. Like you would totally like fit in that." And I was like, "Wow, wait a second, hold on." I had my ding ding moment of like, wait a second, like I have, I know how to record audio. Obviously, I just made a whole DJ album from start to finish. I know how to work with audio. I know how to build websites. I know how to do all this stuff. Like I could have a show talking to people about business. I've known people in business all my life. I've been around business since I was 6 years old. Like I know this stuff. So, but I was like, I was like, I know a lot more people that are doing awesome things, that are, inspiring stories and things. And I was like, I could start a show that it just interviews people doing awesome things to inspire other people. It's like part of what I've been doing, right? Like I've had the Super Joe moniker since 2006. At that point, by my boy Matt, who drew a picture of Super Joe. It's on my website. If you go to my About page, you can see like he drew a picture of Super Joe and wrote Super Joe on it. And I had it in my desk, and like I found it after I was like cleaning up my desk like a year or so later. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. I totally use that. But anyway, back to the plane. So I'm on the plane. I start writing out a list of like people I would want to have on the show, people I know, people I might have connection to, people that I would feel interested in having on the show. And the plane lands, and I pull out my phone and I register the domain name, the Twitter handle, and the Facebook page. This is not a phone. I know it's not a phone. It's a tablet. But I pull all that out, and and I register all that before we got to the rental car, and then I reach out to my man Al Kessel, who's my Mr. Voice, who was just getting like seriously into voice recording at the time, doing books and stuff like that. And because he had interviewed me on his Disney podcast about my Disney music mashup album, and so he was my first episode way back in it was like May 20th or 21st or something like that. I forget what the exact date is of 2014, and I launched the show. And a week later, I was like, all right, we're gonna go three episodes a week. And then about through 2-3 weeks into it, I was hitting like iTunes new and noteworthy, and I was like, okay, we're gonna go 5 days a week. So I did that for a while, and it was exhausting. I wish I could get all that time back I spent editing the podcast. If I only knew that where I'd be today, like I would not have spent that much time doing that. But it taught me a lot of lessons in editing, how to get faster, how to fix people's voices without them sounding robotic. And I learned a ton during that time, but I just was not getting a lot of sleep. And 5 days a week, I did that for about 3 months, 3.5 months or so, before I went back down to 3 days a week so I could start writing books. And what that all led to between starting to write books and the podcasting was I was starting to get speaking gigs talking to kids, which is like everything comes back to being 6 years old, wanting to be a child psychologist, wanting to help other kids. And at the same time, like I had this nagging thing, like I want to help business owners because like I know I'm all about systems and processes, and like eventually I've made a show called The Top with Super Joe Pardo, which stands for Team Offer Process, and that's how I help small businesses get to the top. So for me it's like this blend of all these like creative outlets. I've always been a writer. Like I said, I was blogging back in like 96, 97 when I would like write about what I was doing, my life basically, and video games. It was a big thing for me. So like creating these web pages, like cheat codes and things. And then, so me, like, it just kind of makes sense to like pull it all together. And now with live streaming, it's like, I've been live streaming since 2015, where we did the first anniversary show and we had a big party. It was actually here right in this garage. This is one of my garages that's now turned studio as of thanks to COVID. I have a studio now instead of I have one less garage and one more studio where I can actually do things like this and stream and not be in a really small confined space. And so it's crazy how it kind of all, I always like to say everything happens for a reason and the universe provides. So if you're willing to listen and be a part of it, it's going to provide, and this fly is going to provide plenty of me waving my hand in front of my face.
Well, I know that you had really a trying time here 3 or 4 months ago. Well, it's longer than that. I don't know. I should have looked up the date when we talked originally and got to know each other. But I know you had a real question in your mind. What did you want to do with your life? And you had the family to consider, and you had your life to consider, and it's not an easy decision. Where are you right now in that decision process, Super Joe?
Well, excuse me. So where I am right now is thanks to COVID, thanks to my son having a reactive airway disease. I'm home. So I've been home since Podfest ended. Podfest is a podcasting conference down in Florida back in March, and when I left there, I went to Disney World because my family drove down. I wasn't really crazy about it because even going back into the end of February, I was really nervous. I was like, it kind of would be great if like they just stopped flights or something, and I couldn't go because then we just wouldn't go to Disney World. Like it would be great if they just like closed down Disney World and all that. Well, they did close down Disney World while we were there, unfortunately for me and for my family. But fortunately, nobody got that we know. None of us got sick, so it wasn't the end of the world. I mean, my mom was sick, but she got tested and she didn't have it, which was good because we were sharing a 2-bedroom condo with her when we were down there in Disney. So yeah, so since then I stopped going to the shop, and I've made it known that I'm gonna make a real run at this. Like, so about 8 days after we got back, I was like, okay, I'm back. We got food in the house fine. Like now, we're set. We're good. We can hang out here for as long as we need to. And I was like, what should I? It's like Thursday, so we got back on Saturday at like midnight. So it's still like Sunday morning we got back. So by Thursday, I was like, all right, what do I do now? So I'm gonna start this. I'm gonna do a virtual conference for the Indie Pod, for the Independent Podcast Conference, and we'll do a virtual conference, bring people together. And 8 days later, we held a 2-day event that was 9 hours each day, live streamed into our Facebook group, and it was magical. We raised money for this. We raised like $500 or $600 for the CDC as a way to say thank you. It was totally free for people to attend. It was just a great it was a great time. And I was like, all right, well, in 2 weeks, let's do it again. So I did the Super Entrepreneur Conference, and I held that on my Facebook page, PardoJoe Pardo. And that actually has gotten more views than even like some of the virtual conferences, the indie podcast conference, virtual conferences. And so then I was like, all right, well, 2 weeks, we're going to do it again. We'll do it with a theme this time. And we've just done theme after theme after theme after theme. And we're consistently getting over 1,000 views, sometimes up to 1,200 views, 1,500 views. And it's been awesome bringing so many awesome people together. People feel like they're part of like a mastermind. And for me, like it's bolstered our Facebook group ridiculously. Like to put it into perspective, like we were at like 400 some members in back in September. I changed the name from Mid-Atlantic Podcast Conference to this fly in my face. No, Independent Podcast Conference. And it was like right out of the gate, we started gaining people joining the group just organically, which was absolutely awesome. Well, once we announced that we were doing these virtual conferences, it just it just took off. So now we're over we're about 1,650 members. When we were, like I said, around 400 back in September. So it's just taken off, and it's just growing every single day. Like 10 people a day pretty much are joining the group. It's kind of insane. So I decided that I'm going to kind of pause everything else I'm doing, because I did go back to work with my family's business back in 2018 when we had our second kid. My wife left her job as a teacher, and she's home with the kids every day. I went to go work at the repair shop, and the goal was to build a franchise model there. It's a heavy duty repair shop, and it's gone well. We've made a lot of progress in that lane. But I just, for me, like I really love talking with people. I love technology. Trucks don't really do anything for me. They never did anything. They just really never have done anything for me, as far as like getting me fired up or wanting to like go and know more about the industry and all that. So, so I made it known, like, I don't know if I'm going to come back. I'm really trying to make Independent Podcast Conference into one of the big boys with its own, and make it into its own business out of instead of like a branch of my coaching business that I was doing literally on the side at nights and mornings and after, like sometimes in the afternoons and on weekends with my clients and growing that business. So for me, making that announcement about a week ago with the intention of like, hey, look, we're growing. There's all these people coming in. I have a ton of experience to show and to help people with and get their tech set up right, get not just their tech, but figure out their niche and their avatar, and figure out like what they can do to be entertaining and all that. That's why I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna make a real go at this, and I identified the revenue streams that I want to target, and I'm going for it. I'm going for it, bruh. I'm going for broke here.
Well, you are one of the true experts in the field, and I
Well,
mean,
thank
I
you.
mean
I
that
appreciate that.
with all due respect, of course, and because of that, I, and what podcasts can do for a company, what podcasts can do for an individual. Why in the heck do I want to be and do a podcast? What is that all about?
Yeah, well, it's funny, Chris. For the longest time, I used to say like, I could go and like show other people how to podcast. Like I could go like to knocking on doors and all that, and saying, hey, you know what you need? You need a podcast. But um, it, it's and to a certain extent, you could, and I probably, in retrospect, I probably should have done that. But I just felt kind of like it's like, hey, I know you're a small business owner, and I know you have like all these a million things going on. You know what headache you need? A podcast. Now, what's changed in the last 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years or so, is that the technology to live stream to get it in more places has finally started to get easier. So now, like if you wanted to do a live stream like this using StreamYard, like what we're doing here, it's so much easier. Like once you have somebody shows you how to set the stuff up or setting it up for you, learn how to turn the stuff on. Bam, you're sitting up and you're talking and you're doing it, or even doing it in a way where you're doing it from your phone and kind of mobile with it and trying to get good sound. For me, like I love live streaming. For a couple of reasons. One, it puts me right in front of the people. It puts me, not just my face, but it puts the ability for me to get instant reaction in the live comments, like right there, right? I could see how many people are watching. I could see, what people are reacting to. And in that case, it brings me back to DJing, where I'm just like, hey, like I'm in control of what's going on. Like I can hit the music and we can start talking real loud and getting people riled up and going. Or we could, if we don't know what we're gonna talk about, we can throw the Jeopardy music on there for a second. And it inspires me to keep pushing harder, and it pushes me to speak better on the mic and to do more like with my lighting and like upgrading my camera setup, my the lighting in front of me, the lighting behind me. It pushes me to do a lot of different things that I really enjoy, including like vlogging, right? So like I'm bringing my vlog back and I'm enjoying doing that because it's helping me tell the behind the scenes story of like what you're seeing on the front end. Podcasting, what it does for businesses really is it enables you to get in the ear of your audience in a way that most would just dream about getting, and that sounds like, oh, that sounds crazy, but not really. Like if you really focus in on who you're trying to talk to and you talk to that person, like I'm talking to you right now in your ear, then you
Yes.
are exactly right. So you know that they are going to actively listen. This isn't passive. This isn't like, oh, we're the most watched show, we're The View and we're watched more than anybody else, blah blah blah. Like, yeah, because you're on in like the doctor's offices and stuff. Like that doesn't mean anybody's actively watching you and listening and wanting to participate. Like, not that there aren't people that aren't watching The View, but it's a little skewed in that regard of like, oh, it's just out in the, like, or even like radio for that matter. Like it's just kind of out there, right? And we're kind of guessing as how many people are listening, and you can kind of tell the more you listen, like especially to talk radio, like if nobody, how many times they're saying the phone number over and over and over again to get people to call in, and all, like kind of bait them in. It's it's all part of it, but you kind of pick up on it the more you listen to it. So, but with again with podcasting, you're making yourself the authority. You're making yourself the person that's in the front, and you're getting all these skills that like you wouldn't have otherwise, like from maybe from a technology standpoint, but just talking. If you're nervous about doing talks on stages or something to that effect, this is a great way to be able to get over that fear and work your way towards being like, hey, I'm on stage and I'm doing the thing and I'm getting it going here. Yeah, podcasting is and like I said, the line is getting blurred between podcasting and live streaming, because like right now we're podcasting technically and we're live streaming as well. So it just depends on how you utilize the tech, to and where your audience is going to be at. And if you put yourself there and they find value in what you're offering, whether it's entertainment value or educational value, then they're just gonna eat it up, and they're gonna keep on wanting to come back, and they're gonna get mad when you don't post that next episode at 2 o'clock on Tuesdays like you're supposed to.
And that's important, to be consistent, isn't it? As far as your podcast time and your dependability on what you're broadcasting and so forth. But it also seems to me that there are a variety of podcast formats. You have the solo person who talks about a topic. You have the interview technique. You have the group technique. And I'm sure I could name several more,
Those
but I'll let you do that
style.
yourself. What is the most valuable for a business to become involved with?
I think it depends on what your strategy is and like what you're looking to accomplish. If you're looking to establish your dominance in a niche, to your customer base, or is your customer base the businesses themselves, like it's a business to business versus a customer business to customer, B2C. It just depends. So it's really it can be really difficult, because you could also do like documentary style, where you do a bunch of like interviews and you kind of interweave a story through those interviews. Like that's a lot of work, and you probably, if you're a business owner, you probably are better served getting somebody else to do it for you. You could interview customers about their experience and like what they're bringing to the table, or things like that. But it's got to still be entertaining, right? You could interview other experts in an industry. So maybe what you're doing is like, hey, I'm not making the podcast for the customers, but I'm making the podcast for my industry, because I want to be at the top of my industry. My business is already doing well. We're doing well with the marketing. Maybe you start up a podcast just directly going to those customers, but you ultimately you're like, I want to take it to the next step. I want to elevate our brand in our industry. So it's like, hey, we start this podcast. Now we become the authority by bringing people on in our industry, in our niche, to come to my show. So then people know, like, hey, like I'm the, to go after Larry Roberts there. I'm the cat daddy of the tile industry, like my man Luke Miller, right? So it all depends on what you're looking to accomplish with the podcast. There's just so many different things that you can do, and you can also do different segments. Like you could have multiple segments in a show where maybe you talk with some customers, maybe you talk with an industry expert, maybe you it just depends. I think the other thing is it can get you those conversations. Now, we were talking about this before, Chris, before we jumped on here, that it gets you opportunities to talk to people. So like, I wouldn't have this incredible network of people if I didn't start the Dreamers podcast the way I did, because I didn't have anybody in that network. All my network was either in tech or in the trucking industry. So for me, it's like, okay, well, how do I how like what do I like if I have all these people on now, I'm like getting to connect with people that are doing awesome things all over the planet. My show's getting picked up and I'm getting opportunities because of this. And I still didn't know what the game plan was. Like I wasn't quite sure where I was going to whatever like how it was all going to be very cohesive. Like I knew, basically I never even listened to John Lee Dumas's show until about a year and a half into doing my show because I didn't want to be tainted by what he does. Not that it does bad, just as a creator, I like to only take in certain amounts of content, and I don't like to take in content that's too much in my lane because I don't want to sound like those people. So it's kind of it's one of those things that like not everybody gets that. Like I don't watch a lot of TV. There's very few TV shows I watch actually. I watch a lot of movies because I like the beginning, end, and middle. But I just don't like to sound. I don't want to sound too much like any other thing that's like what I'm doing. So, yeah, I would look at like what's my goal? Who am I trying to reach? And then figure out like, okay, what can I do to reach those people? How can I be entertaining? How can I be educational? How can I invoke emotion to those people? And then just start marketing it. If you're talking about doing a local show, like maybe if you want to be if you want like a broader audience of local people, like start like the Main Street podcast of blah 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 town, and interview other podcast or other business owners in your town. So it's like you're connecting to those business owners, you're getting to meet them and grow those relationships right between the businesses, and you bring in the customers, and it becomes like a win-win synergy. And then you're the go-to guy or girl that like knows what's up, right? Yeah, like so it just
Well,
depends on how you what your strategy of like what you're trying to accomplish is to take a look at. And
but
then don't be
I
afraid
love your
to screw it
I
up
love your
because you're going
I
to.
love your local direction. Now, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but your
Mm.
local direction too, because not everybody can go national. They can't syndicate and get a big audience. But boy, the power of a local podcast, bringing in local businesses, it can absolutely explode your business. And of course, I'm in the direct marketing agency business, but you could be in any business. And if you did a podcast, you would explode your exposure and visibility. So I don't want people to think that doing a podcast is to become a Super Joe Pardo, which has a huge audience. I don't think that anybody to think that you have to go to that length. But if you aspire to that, of course, you can do that if you get the right consulting and direction. Yeah, you can do that. But locally, it doesn't take a lot. You just have to get the basics, and boom,
Yep.
you are virtually the expert in the regional or marketing area. What would you agree with that, Joe?
I absolutely would agree. I think that you're opening your you're just opening up so much opportunity for people to want to connect and grow with the brand that you have developed, and especially if it's a local. I mean, look, that's a case of like, hey, I own the pizza shop, right? So like, how am I going to make pizza interesting or something like that, right? And have a podcast about it or a video stream. Well, that's one way you could do it is, you put the pizza spin on it, but you do it as a local show, right? As your local tri-county show, and then all of a sudden you go in and you get those interviews with those other business owners, and now you're getting pizza orders right from those businesses because they're like, hey, we're having a party, we're having a get together, like we need pizzas. Where are we going to go? Well, we're going to go to Joe's shop because I got this relationship with Joe, and because we sat down and had this conversation, we'd had zero reason to sit down and talk otherwise. So you just get to build those relationships, and then on the customer end, it really stands things up. Like, it gives you a really long touch point for for local. Now, for me, the reason I wanted to go in like a national, international space was because part of my goal was to work from home. part of my goal was, well, to utilize what I know. What I know is the internet, right? I literally grew up on the internet. So for me, it just made sense to like, okay, I'm gonna go. It's maybe a longer route to try to get, because it's not as localized or anything like that. But for me, I was able to cut my teeth talking on the mic, getting interviews, growing my network, and ultimately finding the Mid Atlantic Podcast Conference becoming the independent podcast conference later on down the road, because I love bringing people together, and that enables me to do that, as I've done with LAN parties, raves, other conventions I've gotten involved with, and my family's events as well, with the business and the truck parts industry. So for me, like, it just made a lot of sense to like pull it all together and boop, bring people together, get awesome people in the same room, and we've been able to do that year after year. Though this year it might be a little less. We're looking at a tent literally out in my backyard here behind the store, for 50 people to come, assuming that we stop going in the wrong direction with the virus. So we'll see.
Well, I would love to join you there, but being in North Carolina, it may be a little difficult.
That's
But
understandable. We'll have a live stream ticket available.
well, I understand you're going to do a live on it, so I'll definitely be there for that. This is something that really intrigues me on podcasting, is that people do not believe it has value. I know we've already said, what can you do with a podcast? And they also then go, well, I need to monetize it. I need to make some money doing this because I'm spending all this time, all this effort. I'm interviewing guests. I'm taking care of business, but I'm not making any money. How would you address someone who said that if you were coaching them or consulting with them?
It's a difficult proposition, especially if you're not used to it. I go back to, D. Dave Jackson always says, like, you're asking the wrong question, right? The question is like, how do I make money with this? The first question you got to ask is, how do I get good at this, right? And then how do I get great at this? But you're only going to get good or great if you're actually doing it. And as I always say, you got to be putting in the reps. Like, you got to keep putting out episodes. You got to keep just going, because you're only going to get better by doing it. Like, you could take my course, you could take anybody else's course, but the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, if you're not doing it, then you're not going to get better at it. And even in me, right? Like, I've done hundreds of videos, literally hundreds of vlogs, and I still get nervous on the going on camera when I stop doing it for a while, like a muscle, right? Like, it's just like a language or coding. Like, if you stop doing it, you're bound to forget what you know, which is, I know how to do this. I've done this before. I know how to stand in front of the camera. I know how to put words together and into sentences and all that. It's looking at it from a monetary standpoint, like, it could take you a year. I mean the local is probably the easiest, because which market you're trying to like hit flyers up for, and maybe do some radio ads. On the radio, I hear podcast ads all day long here in Philly. They're constantly, most of them are for radio.com podcasts, but which kind of maybe tells you something about the ad revenue that they're not generating right now, that they're promoting podcasts through the radio.com app. But point being is that I wouldn't look at it from a money standpoint so much as a authority standpoint, with the ability for you to make more money going forward. I mean, great, go back to the pizza shop, right? Like, okay, if you come into Joe's Pizza, you're going to get, and we have a Joe's Pizza here actually down the street. It's very good. They just don't deliver, which is frustrating to say the least. If you come in and you tell us, what's that term? Ask if math is related to science, and that's how we'll know to give you a 10% discount. And then you see, like, how many is math related to science? I wish I could say I came up with that's a PewDiePie term that you're supposed to say to him when you meet him in person, so that he knows that you're an actual fan and not just somebody that's like, oh, there's a celebrity. So anyway, point being is you say that, and all of a sudden you see like, okay, this is the return. People are listening to the show. You see the downloads go up. Um, mind share is worth something. If it wasn't worth something, people wouldn't pay for the ads on the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Like, and in my opinion, those ads are not worth. They're worth a lot more than they actually charge for them, because when you're at a party, everything gets quiet when the ads come on. Like people are actively watching these things versus like, oh, the game stopped, so now we're going to talk. It's not the opposite. So, from my perspective, like if you can grow that, it's a super valuable asset to have, your face, your name, your product, your brand in front of at top of mind, even if your show isn't centered around what it is that you actually do. You're just bringing that demographic to you just to market pizza. So you're the sponsor of the show. Maybe you get some other sponsors, local sponsors, and now all of a sudden it's like, hey, yeah, it's my show, I'm running it, but like for $50, $100, we're dropping your ad right into the show, and then we're promoting and rising together and banding together as local businesses, bringing it all back to the Chamber of Commerce thing, because I love my local Chamber of Commerce, even though I don't get to every meeting that I wish I could have over the years. I probably would help me a little bit more, but part of my thing was like, the way I saw it was like, I was spending more of my time focusing on people online rather than just the local side of it. So it just depends on how you want to. And not, everything's not right for everybody, but I really feel like if you're passionate about what you're doing, and you're like, I'm looking for another way to get in front of my audience, this is an opportunity to do that.
Well, I definitely agree entirely with that, because I don't. When you're doing a local, thank you for that recognition. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. The main thing is, it's not about the money right now, because you're not going to compete with Super Joe Pardo and his sponsorships. You're not going to compete with. He mentioned John Lee Dumas, which is one of the legends around, or
Mm-hmm.
what is it, Joe
Rogan,
whatever.
Joe
What
Rogan.
was his
Yeah.
last name?
Well,
It remind-
he was famous before that though. Like he already
yeah,
had an audience before that, so his story is quite a bit different than John Lee Dumas's or mine.
yeah, exactly. But
Yeah, it's a bit
I
different.
get, but the point is basically that's not what you're thinking about. You're thinking about developing a relationship with the community, because we're
Mm-hmm.
in the relationship business. I don't care what business you're in. I don't care if you have a dress shop or a pharmacy or a candy shop. I don't care what you're in. You're in the relationship business. Now, when you can
I
grow
love it.
that relationship business through another avenue like podcasting, then why not go ahead and do it? You may be nervous at first. Who cares though? People accept the fact that you're on camera. People forget about the fact that you may stammer and stutter and do all kinds of nonsense, but it, they don't realize that people don't care as long as you're relating to them and helping them and giving them good information and good contact information about their business and other people around. So podcasting is not a you don't have to be a podcast star in order to make it
No,
work.
no, especially if you
You
already have a business. Like you're already taking care of the number one thing at that point, making money,
yeah,
right? Like, and look, if your business is struggling, I don't know the podcast investing a bunch of time in podcasting is going to fix your business. In fact, I would, as the business coach in me, I would say probably not, and that probably is not how you should spend a good chunk of your a chunk of your time. So I would say that if you're at a place where you feel confident with the business and you're looking for another way to do it, this is a way to do it, right? Getting in front of those people, but you gotta be specific about who you're trying to reach. And that was one of the issues that I ran into, because we were supposed to start a podcast at the at Pardo Fleet Solutions, the repair shop. And one of the walls that I came up against was the people that I was trying to explain this concept to. Was like, well, it's for the shop managers, and I'm like, well, okay. So what are we gonna bring to the table? Like that's gonna get them to say, oh, I gotta tune, make sure I'm listening to that show, versus like a show that maybe is for maybe for them, but really it's geared towards the like the drivers, the people who are actually sitting in cars, trucks all day driving, who could be listening and deciding because they're operators, operator. Man,
Owner
I
operator. There we go.
can't talk to save my life. Owner
Is
operators.
that's a senior moment right there.
Yeah, right. Owner operators. Owner operators who they own their truck or they lease their truck from a leasing company that is kind of in control, but they have the say of like who's going to be going to where are they going to take their truck and all that stuff. So it's kind of like a messy thing. And then we just didn't. I mean, I wrote a bunch of ideas and it just didn't go anywhere yet. So I might still help them. I'm probably going to still help them get that off the ground at some point. But like, I know I didn't really want to host it because the trucking thing is just doesn't do anything for me. So
Yeah.
business as a whole, it does. But I feel like I would. I don't know. I don't feel like it would serve me to do that right now. So here we are.
But Super Joe, you've covered so many aspects of why not, and so forth. How in the world can they learn from you, and what can you give them? And because you have literally years of experience here, how can you help the people that are listening right now to benefit from your experience?
Yeah, so I would send them over to Indie, INDIE, podcasters.com. There you'll find a whole host of resources from the ultimate guide to start your podcast in 2020 to the tons of blog posts, tons of podcasting episodes, video episodes, tutorials, episodes where I'm, in fact, I was just doing one earlier today where I was helping Magic Brad figure out how to niche in his audience so he could finally like stop like moving the cheese around and like chasing it constantly. So yeah, so those are the things that are you'll find there that are totally free: the podcast, the blog posts, the guides. And then we have our free events, the IndiePod virtual events, the virtual conferences. You can find those over at indiepodcasters.com/virtual. And then we also have the paid services. So we have IndiePod University, where you get access to it's almost like 150 plus hours at this point of podcasting resource videos that are sorted by how you different topics and all that stuff, as well as so that's a paid service that's it's like $10 a month. Or you could step up to the Super Circle, which is the supercharge your podcast, build your podcast into a business that's launching actually tomorrow, where it's a whole separate Facebook community. It's a whole separate set of videos that are designed they're all tutorial based videos to get you, really thinking about who you're targeting, how to set the podcast up, how to edit podcasts if you want to edit it. Though I would suggest if you have a business, and again, if your business isn't struggling, that you should absolutely be looking to hire out some of those people. We have people in our community. You can, when you go to the Facebook, or when you go to the indiepodcasters.com, there's also a community button there. That's a totally free Facebook community that, like I was talking about earlier, has grown exponentially in the last several months here. And it's, there's tons of editors in there that people that's what they do for a living. They edit podcasts. So if that's, if you're like, oh, I feel like I'm going to stutter, stammer, or whatever, maybe Facebook Living, out of the gate isn't the best idea for you, especially because you have an established business and you want to sound at least somewhat professional and knowledgeable. So what I would suggest is, you record the podcast episodes, or you record the video, you send it over to an editor, they edit it for you, and then they can either post it for you depending on the service that you get, and take care of that for you. So, but even still, like in the super circle, the supercharger podcast program, we have I have programs and ways of teaching people how to host better, how to set up their camera better, how to set up their lighting better. Because just because you have an editor doesn't necessarily mean that you have somebody right there that can set up the mic and set up all this other equipment for you, or how to do it, how to pare it down as basic as and I wouldn't suggest using AirPods, but like how to use maybe earpods that has an inline mic to record a podcast, a solo show, right? Those are the types of things that you can get those resources at indiepodcasters.com.
Well, there you go. There's so many different ways to take care of podcasting. In fact, you don't have to invest a fortune when you start out. You can do a podcast from your smartphone.
Absolutely.
with some earpods in, and you can begin it that way if you want to. And of course, as you know, StreamYard now, which is a great platform, allows the iOS and the Android. Now they just brought that in, and recently allowed 10 people to be on the system. I didn't know that till today. But anyway, all the systems are different. They're not. There's no one that's perfect. Don't even examine it as perfect. You can choose all kinds of systems and platforms to broadcast from, and if you become part of Super Joe's programs, they will show you the variety of programs and platforms that you can use to improve your podcast and to do it where it's comfortable for you to get it out the door and out to the public. So, Joe, is there anything you'd like to say before we close out today's version of Super Joe?
Yeah. So, well, first off, thank you for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it. I always love being able to come and spread knowledge and spread ideas, and because those ideas that I give to you will spark ideas inside of you, and then I'll see those ideas and get inspired by all over again. So it's a constant circle of inspiration. So thank you so much for having me. If you want to get more about from me, you can either go to indiepodcasters.com or go to Super Joe Pardo, like it's spelled right here at the bottom, superjoepardo.com. And you can get all of my podcasts, the Super Joe Pardo Show. The Dreamers podcast became the Super Joe Pardo Show. You can get the Business Geeks podcast as well. You can get access to old conferences that I've held around business. And if you're looking for somebody that can help you strategize how to optimize your business and build it stronger, then I'm definitely your guy. Reach out to me over at joe@superjoepardo.com. And thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure. And if you'll PM me all those links and all that information, I'll make sure it goes into the show notes for this particular podcast. Joe, you're special. I appreciate your taking the time to be with us. And I know we will talk again within minutes, possibly, or very soon. All right. Thank you, Joe, for being a part of Unintentional Heroes. It's fascinating. When I get involved in the podcast for Unintentional Heroes, I realize that there are so many talented people out there that can give us a leg up on anything that you desire to do. And in fact, they give you ideas that you may not even have ever considered. And today, I think, is one of those days where we have a complete overview of using podcasts to grow your business. I encourage you to reach out to Super Joe's systems, his URLs, which will be part of the show notes in this particular podcast, and learn how you can grow your business through podcasts, whether it's local or national. It doesn't matter. And you will benefit without a doubt. As we close, always remember to listen, learn, and give. I will see all of you soon. Bye bye.